Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Ricci, the Director of Alumni Relations and Engagement for the School of Arts and Sciences. I believe we have a lot of new attendees to today's program, so I'd like to first welcome you all to the School of Arts and Sciences virtual Scarlet Speaker event. Before we start, a few quick housekeeping notes. We've muted everyone's microphones and turned off your cameras so there's no background noise or distractions during the presentation. We ask that you use the Q&A feature to submit any questions you may have throughout the presentation, and then we will answer them at the end. This event is being recorded and stored online for viewing afterwards, so if you know someone who you think may have wanted to join but couldn't join live, we will have a link online, which I will send in a post-event email. And as a last reminder, these events are not just for Rutgers alumni. So if you were to ever get an invite to one of these and you think someone might be interested in the topic, by all means, please forward them the invitation. Now I would like to get started on today's speaker, Dr. Jim Hughes. Dr. Hughes is Dean Emeritus of the Rutgers Edward J. Blaustein School of Planning and Public Policy. He served as the dean for 22 years, from 1995 to 2017. And was named the University Professor in 2017 by the Rutgers Board of Governors. As a university professor, of which there are only 29 university-wide, he has had the privilege of conducting research and educational activities across Rutgers disciplines and schools of his choice. He entered the Rutgers College of Engineering as a freshman in 1961 and received his BS in Planning Engineering in 1965. After serving 2 years as an artillery officer in the U.S. Army, he returned to Rutgers and received the university's first master's degree in urban planning in 1969 and its first PhD degree in urban planning and policy development in 1971. In 1971, he then joined the Rutgers planning faculty and rose through the ranks to become dean of the Edward J. Blaustein School of Planning and Public Policy. He is a nationally recognized expert on demographic and economic issues and has made thousands of addresses and presentations to government, private sector, nonprofit, and academic organizations. In addition to Rutgers Then and Now, 2 Centuries of Campus Development, a historic and photographic odyssey, he is the author or co-author of 36 books and monographs and more than 150 articles. Among his books are The Atlantic City Gamble, published by Harvard University Press, and 4 published by the Rutgers University Press, including America's Demographic Tapestry, Baselines for the New Millennium, and New Jersey's Post-Suburban Economy. He also directs the Rutgers Regional Report, which has produced more than 50 major studies on both New Jersey and the broad multi-state metropolitan region. Please join me in welcoming today's speaker, Dr. Hughes.
Thank you, Dana, for that kind introduction. We will look at 10 stages of campus development today and how Rutgers got to where it is today. It did not come out of the womb as it looks in 2025, but it took 2 centuries of expansion, which were highly incremental and opportunistic to get to where we are today. There was no long-term plan. We started off with only 6 acres, which is today's Old Queens campus, and then had to incrementally acquire land in a highly speculative environment. New Brunswick was enmeshed in the Industrial Revolution, and there was tremendous land fragmentation and speculation. And this stood in marked contrast to many land grant institutions and many of our Big Ten colleagues who had unencumbered landscapes to plan out their institutions in a long-term fashion. So we had to go through 10 stages of development, and we proceeded from the south, which is the Queens campus today, in a northern direction. This is the 1837 plan of the city of New Brunswick with the Queens campus block outlined in red. And as you can see, Rutgers fully occupied a completed Old Queens building in 1826-27. So this was within a decade, the city had platted itself out around that one block area, leaving very little room for easy expansion. And here's a close-up of that 1937 plan. This is the orthophoto of Old Queens campus today. To the south is Somerset Street. To the north is Hamilton Street. As you can see, let me see. Uh, this is the way the campus developed. We have 9 stages indicated on here. The 10th stage was a redevelopment that spanned a number of different geographies, but outlined in red is the Queens Campus 1. We did not proceed in a linear fashion. The seminary pulled out of Old Queens in 1856. That's stage 2. It bypassed stage 3, which was the Nielsen campus. And as I'll point out subsequently, in pre-colonial times, that was the New Brunswick copper mining and processing industry, which polluted the entire site. So it was bypassed early on. Then the campus had a leapfrog, the Bishop Estate, which is indicated as number 6, which is today's Bishop campus, and proceeded to Nielsen Field number 4, and a College Field and the College Avenue Gym in stage 5. Rutgers acquired the Bishop Estate in 1926, so was able to move back. And then it ran out of land, so it expanded its athletic facilities on the then River Road campus. That's today's Bush campus. Bush campus today is a major academic empire unto itself. In the 1920s and early 30s, it was viewed simply as an extension of the College Avenue campus. And then it returned to the traditional College Avenue campus for stage 8, which was Alexander Library, and stage 9 were the River dormitories. So here are the formal street boundaries of each of those stages, 1 through 9, and they're listed on the left side of the slide. And we will be going through each of those 10 stages of development. This is the aerial view in 1922 looking north, with each of the 9 stages indicated on the land areas of that aerial photograph. As you can see, this was a time when the campus was relatively undeveloped compared to today. Now, on the right side of the exhibit is the historic J&J manufacturing complex. This was known as the cotton mill because J&J originally was not a pharmaceutical company. It was a sanitary gauze and bandage maker. This is the site of J&J's parking deck today. This is Old Queens, Kirkpatrick Chapel, and today's Voorhees Mall. Then and now, a full century apart. On the left is a 22 aerial. On the right is a 2024 aerial. And again, you can see the Delaware and Raritan Canal has been covered over by Route 18. Intense development where Nielsen Field and College Field were once located. This is looking in the other direction. It's an aerial view 2022, looking south. And here is Old Queens. Here's the chapel here. This is the Geological Museum, Voorhees Mall, the J&J manufacturing complex. But what's important here is in 1922, New Brunswick was an intense manufacturing and industrial dynamo. And all of these structures were related to that industrial economy, hundreds and hundreds of structures. Here's the view today on the right side. That entire economy has disappeared. There is only one leftover manufacturing industrial structure indicated by the red arrow. That's the historic J&J power plant. It's the only building left. Today, it's the J&J Museum, which is very worthwhile to visit. So let's look at the 10 stages, starting with Queens Campus. Orthophoto today versus the 1925 historic map. So these are 100 years apart. And virtually the campus has been unchanged except for 2 things. The added asphalt and macadam paving, which did not exist in 1925. And in 1925, there was the original president's house, which after one of the presidents wanted to move out, became the alumni faculty house. Today, it's a parking area that serves the entire Queens campus. A broader perspective from 1925. This is Old Queens. It's indicated Queens College, on the map. Uh, Bleecker Place was once a parkway which bisected what is today's Voorhees Mall. That's stage 3. Stage 2 was the original seminary, which moved out of Old Queens in 1856. Originally, Old Queens housed the Rutgers Prep Grammar School, as well as the New Brunswick Theological Seminary. And as you can imagine, all three of those crammed into one building created problems in the early stages of Old Queens, but that was quickly corrected. This is the Queens campus panorama in the late 19th century. Originally, the railroad tracks were at ground level. Today, that's the Northeast Corridor line, which is probably the finest rail corridor in the country. They were not elevated until 1904. This is an example of what used to go by the Queens campus. This is a 10-wheel iron locomotive. The house in the background here, that was the original president's house. The chapel and Old Queens were over there. This is an aerial view of the railroad tracks, the trolley line, which ran along Somerset Street, and the Queens campus. So Rutgers had access to the finest in transportation technology as the 20th century unfolded. Old Queens construction was started in 1809. The Old Queens block was given to Rutgers, 6 acres, by the Parker family of Perth Amboy. Construction was not completed, but the college moved in 1811, and it took until 1825 to finally complete the Old Queens structure. This is the rendering by John McComb. It originally was fancier than this, but the Board of Trustees scaled it down. But this rendering is almost exactly what was built. Now, John McComb would be known today as a Starchitect or a superstar, and he was certainly a superstar of his era, one of the nation's leading architects, and he was a favorite of New York City. He designed the New York City Hall. He designed Gracie Mansion, which is the official residence of the mayor of New York City. And down the road south of Rutgers, he built the headquarters for the Princeton Theological Seminary right after Old Queens. This is sort of like Old Queens on steroids. One of the influences that I had and influenced the book was a man named Doc Wilkins. He came to Rutgers in 1946, right after World War II. He was my mentor and advisor as an undergraduate from 1961 to 1965. He was hired as to develop a planning program in the College of Engineering. He was also hired as the Rutgers campus planner. He was also hired as the director of the Middlesex County Planning Board. So he had a lot of responsibilities. And one of his quips was that Old Queens had a Queen Anne front and a Mary Ann back. Now, why did he make that quip? Well, 3 sides of Old Queens are made out of regularized brownstone, which was extensive to reproduce. And the front was fancier. As you can see, it has 4 Doric pilasters. Pilasters are decorative columns that have no structural impact. But on the rear, they ran out of money, so they didn't have any money for brownstone. So they used fieldstone and rubble to finish the construction. So it had a Queen Anne front and a Mary Ann back. And you can see the difference in the front door on the left, relatively fancy, and a very plain, ordinary, plain Jane rear. This is Old Queens in 1901. It originally had shutters on every single window of the 3 floors, and the windows and shutters were originally painted brown. At one time, most of the Rutgers buildings were fully adorned with ivy, totally covered with ivy. And here they had the windows painted white. And this is Old Queens today. Shutters, for some reason, only on the first floor. And I assure you, those air conditioners protruding from the windows are not historically correct, but they make the building livable. Uh, Here's the location of the president's house. This was the second structure built on the Queens campus. Uh, this is a photo of it when it became the Alumni Faculty Club. President Demarest did not want to live there, so we'll get into where he eventually moved. It suffered storm damage in 1948, so it eventually was demolished. It was a very well-built building. It took them a long time to take it down, almost leveled, all but gone. Today, it's completely disappeared. It's the site of the parking lot. Historically, Alexander Hamilton, before the president's house was built, protected George Washington with his artillery brigade, artillery battery, when Washington was retreating from Manhattan to Trenton. This summer, probably at the Center for Advanced Infrastructure and Transportation, CATE, at the School of Engineering, has a LiDAR system, underground radar. We're going to try and find the walls and cellar floor of the president's house and try to mark them out in the parking lot, because I don't think they took the walls out, just filled in the old site for the parking lot. Van Nest, where this presentation is being taken today, is at the far northwest corner of the Queens block. Doc Wilkins called it a very simple but elegant little box. It was made out of brick. It was originally 2 stories, had a widow's walk on the roof line. Here's the faculty taking break. They had a real tough classroom session that day. Eventually, in 1893, a 3rd floor was added to the building, and an elegant front porch with Doric columns was added to the building, as we'll see later. The brick didn't exactly match on the 3rd floor. Like old Queens, it too was covered with ivy at one time. Looked very, very collegiate. This is the way it looks today. You can see the slightly different brick on the 3rd floor. The Schenck Observatory was the first scientific building at Rutgers. This was the observatory facing George Street. It was like a garden structure in the president's house backyard when it was originally built. It was modeled exactly after the Tower of the Wind structure in Athens, which is considered the first meteorological station in the world. That's the way it looked in the early 20th century, and that's the way it looks today. On the right side, that's the Zimmerly Art Museum in the background. Geological Hall, the next building to be constructed. This was also done in brownstone. This is Geological Hall 110 years ago. The cottage path in the front no longer exists. Geological Hall today, largely unchanged. Now, Geological Hall was designed by Henry Janeway Hardenberg, who was the great-great-grandson of Jacob Hardenberg, who was the original president of Rutgers. Does that mean this was a NEPO, that he was given special consideration because he was a related person? Well, not really. He was a superstar, and this is the roster of the famous buildings that he designed after Old Queens. First, the Dakota in New York City. That was the first luxury apartment building ever built. On the right today, it's one of the most fashionable co-ops. It's where John Lennon lived. He did the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan. He did the Willard Hotel in Washington, D.C. He did the original Waldorf Astoria Hotel, which was actually 2 separate hotels. That's on the left. Unfortunately, that didn't survive. It was knocked down. But fortunately, it had a good replacement on the right side. It was replaced by the Empire State Building, so not that bad a trade-off. He also did Palmer Stadium at Princeton University, a real concrete megastructure. However, it was replaced in 1998. So he designed also the Sophia Astley Kirkpatrick Memorial Chapel and Library. This was the first structure named for a woman on the Rutgers campus. It was also not simply a chapel, but it was also a library. The library had been in Old Queens, but it got too large for the size of its collection. This is his blueprints for it, the front and the rear. What was today's rear was called the front entrance to the library. This is the historic view from the entrance to the Queens campus. This is where the library was on the second floor of the complex. And the library was here. The ground floor had a president's office and rooms for the board of trustees. The next slide will show the interior, and you'll see the lights glaring in from those windows. Quite an attractive facility there, but eventually it outgrew that, and the Voorhees Library was built, which we'll get to shortly. So here's a historic postcard with the President's House on the right, in 1916, over a century ago, and Kirkpatrick Chapel today. Next building was Winans Hall. This is Winans Hall in summer when the campus was lush. Those are trolley tracks on Somerset Street. Now, Doc Wilkins, in the nomination form for the Register of Historic Places, called Winans Hall a smorgasbord because it had so many different architectural styles and was not easy to describe. The arrow points to a clock tower, which once was on the top of the building that has long since disappeared. This is Winans Hall today, I think a real asset to the campus. In the 1980s, Winans Hall was condemned. The interior structure made out of wood had deteriorated badly. And so Governor Tom Kean provided resources to completely reconstruct the building. This was stripped down to the bare bones. They put a steel frame inside it and completely reconstructed it. This was the Marianne side of the building. Complete restoration today. They did a superb job of restoring it, and an excellent example of historic preservation. Now, two walls around Old Queens, and there's a corner post that's often ignored on the intersection of Hamilton Street and George Street. And this pillar or post indicates the two walls. The wall along George Street was paid for by George Buckham, class of 1832, and erected in 1894. The wall along Hamilton Street, erected in 1913 by his granddaughter in his honor. Now, why do we focus on those walls? It's a nice wall. It's certainly in need of tender, loving care today, but it has significance really a century later, because it became the model for the Johnson & Johnson campus in downtown New Brunswick. In the late 1970s, the architectural firm of I.M. Pei, so I.M. Pei and his partner, Henry Cobb, used that as the model for the wall that was going to surround the entire J&J campus in New Brunswick. Their model at the time was a building in a park in a city. That was their design theme, which was sort of reminiscent of Old Queens as a building in a park in a city. So here along George Street, on one side, on the left, you can see the George Buckham Wall, and on the right is the J&J Wall today. There were 4 historic campus gateways built in a 7-year period on the 4 sides of Queens campus and the like. And it would be more than a century and a half before the campus got another gateway. First one was the Henry Baldwin Gateway, erected in 1901. It's on College Avenue, right next to Winans Hall. That's the way it looked originally. That's Geological Hall in the background. Again, ivy festoons everything. That's the way it looks today. The classic entrance to the Queens campus, the 1883 Memorial Gates. It originally could only handle horses and carriages. There's a postcard colorizing it. Ultimately had to be completely rebuilt so that automobiles would gain access to the campus. Uh, the class of 1902 Memorial Gateway, located on Hamilton Street. This is before the Buckham Wall. It was just simply two corner posts and the stairs. Greatly expanded as the Buckham Wall was expanded along Hamilton Street. That's the way it looks today. That's the very glamorous archway, tremendously exciting detailing on that element. And finally, the class of 1882 Gateway on the corner of Somerset Street and College Avenue survived very, very well until the present time. And that's the close-up of the top of the gateway. Now, Alexander Johnson Hall today was originally the second building built on the campus, but it wasn't on the Queens campus. It was across the street on College Avenue. And it originally was built for the Rutgers College Grammar School, which moved out of Old Queens in 1830. And this is interesting. If you can read the bottom, preparatory schoolboys recite in the large building at the left, and that's the famous old Rutgers College Grammar School. The building at the right is occupied by the children of the elementary school. So that's the grammar school that became Johnston Hall. And that's the elementary school, which was an elegant mansion, tremendously ornate iron fence in the front. It became the Allen and Joan Bildner Center, and it was clad in aluminum siding, unfortunately. So here's an aerial photo of the 1930s. This is the Queens campus, Old Queens, Winans Hall, or Van Nest Hall, Winans Hall, Geological Hall, Kirkpatrick Chapel, and the President's House. First fun factoid, you see this little arrow on the J&J cotton mill building. That was actually a navigational aid. Believe it or not, 7 miles northeast of here was Hadley Airport in South Plainfield, and that would guide the planes into Hadley Airport. Why did they guide the planes there? Well, Hadley Airport was the East Coast destination of the first transcontinental airmail system. So all the airmail flowing from the West Coast would come into Hadley Airport in South Plainfield. Today, it's a shopping center. Parking has always been a problem at Rutgers. Here's the automobiles of the 1930s aligning College Avenue. Stage 2 was Seminary Hill, as I said before. It leapfrogged what's today's Voorhees Mall. This is Seminary Hill today. This is the result of what happened in stage 10 of development, a complete redevelopment of that block. This is the original seminary with Herzog Hall, its primary building facing Old Queens, across what is today's Voorhees Mall. So this campus comprised 2 Victorian structures here, residential structures to house the faculty, the glamorous Sage Library, Herzog Hall, the main building, Sudam Hall, the Student Center, a gymnasium, and 2 other Victorian residents for faculty. So here's the transformation from 1925 on the right to what it is today after stage 10. That's the completed seminary campus panorama about 1870. And I would like to assert that that is the finest ensemble, or was the finest ensemble of collegiate buildings of the 19th century, a perfectly balanced, harmonious set of structures. Its centerpiece, built in 1856, was Herzog Hall. Again, a much, much larger structure than Old Queens, and it was actually the largest structure in New Brunswick when it was built. Another version looking northwest of a very impressive building, Herzog Hall and Sudam Hall. Sudam Hall was to its east or right. That was the gymnasium classroom building. and Student Center. That's James Sudam. He provided the money for the building of Sudam Hall, and its architect was Henry Hardenberg again. Garden Sage Library was built on the other side of Herzog Hall. That's the sole campus survivor today. Second fun fact, the seminary had its own field artillery. The arrow points to a buried cannon in the front. Close-up, historical close-up. It was a gift of the Collegiate Reformed Church in Manhattan. It was a disabled British cannon from the Revolutionary War. Now, whether it was a real gift or they just wanted to get rid of it and they said, let's give it to New Brunswick, I don't know. It's lost to history. The interior of the Sage Library was and is magnificent. It's the only interior we featured in the book because most people at Rutgers have never seen it. That's the way it looks today. As an undergraduate in the 60s, it was still open to Rutgers students, and I spent many evenings in there reading and studying my engineering lessons at the time. The historical collection is too valuable today of all the manuscripts that they have, so it's only open on Friday by appointment. Sad day in history, 1966. Herzog Hall was sent to the landfill. It was destroyed and replaced by a modernized structure, Swimmer Hall. Herzog Hall deconstruction, a magnificent building just being knocked down. An article in the Home News, the old order changeth, and the like. The seminary thought if it had a new modern building, it could attract more potential orders of the Dutch Reform religion. It didn't work. So that's what happened from the glorious 19th century to the mid-20th century, where we've had a lot of architectural disasters, such as the loss of Penn Station in New York City. Unfortunately, this is the modernized Seminary Hill campus that emerged in the late 1960s, and most of the trees and landscaping also disappeared. The only thing left was the Sage Library and one of the Victorian residential structures and the like. But I can't leave you with that picture. Fortunately, Zwimmer Hall in stage 10 was knocked down. Happy days were here again for architectural fans. And this is Seminary Hill redeveloped today. This is the end of stage 10. So this is the new seminary building. The reason for the redevelopment is that the seminary was land rich but financially poor as its enrollment dribbled over time during the 20th century. There wasn't much demand for ministers for the Dutch Reformed Church. So they were land rich. This parcel of land bisected the Rutgers campus, and Rutgers had really longed to acquire it. And we'll come back to that story. Also, in front of Herzog Hall was a stairway. And as an undergraduate student heading to Murray Hall, which was the old engineering building, I'd use the stairway cutting through the campus, which the seminary was not happy about. But the new Rutgers Academic Building, which is located in the same place, replicated that stairway. And that's the stairway up close today. So here's sort of a tremendous transformation from disaster to really a miraculous recovery. Left 19th century, middle 20th century, far right 21st century. Stage 3, Nielsen campus, which I said was bypassed. That's the orthophoto of Voorhees Mall today and its component buildings. Notice that in comparison to Old Queens, the buildings are not perfectly aligned. And that's the problem because the block was trapezium shaped. So the old Queen buildings are very simply aligned along Hamilton Street, but a trapezium is a trapezoid with none of the sides parallel to one another. So some of the buildings are parallel to College Avenue, some to George Street, some to Hamilton Street, some to Bleecker Place. This is the aerial looking east of what is today's Voorhees Mall. And you can see how the cotton mill loomed over the campus for many, many, many decades and the like. And that's the full J&J manufacturing complex. Old Queens was here, Seminary was here. Now, I said before, this was the New Brunswick copper mining and copper processing complex. The whole complex went down here where J&J is today. This was the drainage ravine called Mine Run, which ran through it. All the despoils from the processing were thrown in there. When many Rutgers buildings were built, they would find the old mine shafts. J&J commissioned a study because they had a lot of mine shafts and columns located within its campus as it redeveloped it. That's what the ravine looked like, and that's why the seminary didn't want to locate there, so it went to Seminary Hill or Holy Hill. As land became more valuable in New Brunswick, as the second industrial revolution after the Civil War emerged, development in New Brunswick proceeded north, and so this land became more valuable as a potential residential parcel. So James Nielsen eventually bought the land. He filled in the ravine, put a culvert in there, and added Bleecker Place along here because he wanted to provide access to more residential lots or create more residential lots. So that's what his roadway, his parkway, Bleecker Place looked like in 1905, New Jersey Hall, the picture taken from in front of Old Queens. 1934, this is looks much better than it actually was, but it was just about to be dismantled in 1934 with mature trees and cars really clogging it up. And eventually, during the late Depression, 1836, 37, 38, university received WPA funds to create a mall and eliminate the roadways. The Nielsen House, James Nielsen built that for his son, first house on the block, quite an elegant structure. Rutgers still owns that today, except it's covered with green aluminum siding. Second house built was Riverstead for George Cook. George Cook was a Rutgers professor. We owe him a real debt of gratitude. Rutgers was in competition with Princeton to become the land-grant institution of New Jersey. George Cook was able to secure the prize for Rutgers. That's what it looked like in the late 19th century. That's what it looks like today, reasonably the same. Third house on the Nielsen block was the Professor Theodore Doolittle House. He was a professor at the seminary, very affluent. President Demarest didn't want to live on the president's house on the Queens campus, so Rutgers purchased the Doolittle House in 1907. As and you can see on the bottom of the slide, the president's residence on Seminary Place. That's the way it looked in the 20s. And again, its fate, like some of those old structures, was aluminum siding, this time yellow. Again, the shutters have long since been sent to the landfill. Actually, on Bleecker Place, one of the first structures built on a subdivided lot was a building that they gave to a Delta Upsilon fraternity, quite an elegant Victorian mansion. It's now the site of today's art library. New Jersey Hall was the first academic building built to the north of the Queens campus. This was a result of the Second Morrill Act. The state provided funds for the agricultural experiment station. So it was originally called Agricultural Hall, quite a unique structure built in 1889. And notice there was no Buckham Wall. There was a decrepit picket fence along Hamilton Street surrounding Old Queens. Unfortunately, a fire in 1903, the result of the fire, Rutgers had full insurance, so it was effectively rebuilt. It was subject to a 60s modernization, as you can see. The circular window and other windows were bricked up. That was the modernization of that era. So there's then And now the contrast. Uh, some of you may have, in your early years, indulged in Ballantine beer, produced in Newark. Robert Ballantine was a trustee of Rutgers, and he provided money for a much-needed gymnasium called Ballantine Gymnasium. It was located on the corner of George Street and Hamilton Street. Quite an elegant structure. Had an addition uh, funded by his wife in 1913. The addition included a swimming pool. So that's the then looking north. This is the Zimmerly Art Gallery today. There's Old Queens, there's the chapel, the President's House, New Jersey Hall, then Bleecker Place. Now it's the Zimmerly Museum, which surrounds it, and only a portion of the original Ballantine Gymnasium was left and incorporated into the museum. Why only a portion? Well, in 1930, there was a unique event. The Ballantine Gymnasium underwent a rapid, unscheduled disassembly. In other words, a catastrophic explosion. As a land-grant institution, Rutgers had to provide instruction in military science and provide ROTC. That was the ROTC armory at the time, if you would believe it, 700 Springfield rifles, et cetera, et cetera. Somehow it exploded in 1930 and destroyed the entire gymnasium. Except in the rear, they were able to save that portion that had the swimming pool, and they created Ballantine Hall with the remainder. So it included the rear of the gymnasium and the swimming pool, and it was given to the then College of Engineering, and it was their hydraulics laboratory, their fluids dynamic lab that used the swimming pool as the essential part of the lab. President Demarest called that the finest swimming pool in the country at its time, with elegant tiling and the like. That's what Ballantine Hall looked like in 1935 and what the gymnasium looked like in 1920. In November of 1963, I was in that building with my classmates. We were waiting for the start of the fluids dynamic lab and our exercises that we had to go through. The instructor came in and told us classes were canceled because President Kennedy had just been assassinated. Eventually, it was incorporated into the Zimmerly Art Museum. If you're on George Street today, you're able to take a peek and see what the remnant of the Ballantine swimming pool looks like. And I guarantee you, the Zimmerly staff are not allowed to go swimming in the swimming pool during their lunch hours. It's used for storage. Voorhees Library was next to be constructed. Ralph Voorhees was a blind minister living in Clinton, New Jersey. He provided the funding along with his wife. It was made of Longmeadow, Massachusetts brownstone, this wonderful yellow color with granite trim in other parts of the structure. Unfortunately, all of it was painted to match the addition to the Zimmerly Museum, which we'll see subsequently. At one time, there were tennis courts on the campus. They were constructed in 1908. Those are the tennis courts. This is Riverstead, the George Cook House. That's the Johnson & Johnson cotton mill behind it. This is Professor Robert Prentice hitting the ball. Faculty played tennis, and they actually captured the ball in the photograph. Rendering of the Graduate School of Education on the site of the tennis courts. Again, that would be a unique feature of Rutgers, taking amenities and using them as building sites. So I tend to get cynical sometimes. That's the Graduate School of Education today. Engineering building, Murray Hall. This is the only building at Rutgers that received funds from Andrew Carnegie to aid in its construction. That was the rendering of it. Built the engineering building under construction, completed. Like the rest of Rutgers buildings were once totally covered with ivy. That's a weeping hemlock in front, Tsuga canadensis pendula. It's long gone, but the ivy's gone too. And really a unique structure that I admire very much. Chemistry building was next to be constructed. Today it's known as Millidoler Hall. This is a rendering of what it would look like. Now, it also had a famous architect at the time, really a national superstar. Today would be called a starchitect. Louis Ayres was an 1896 electrical engineering graduate from Rutgers. And Dean Coutinho today of engineering would say, engineers can do anything. And Louis Ayres is the perfect model for that. He ultimately joined McKim, Mead, and White as an architect, then York and Sawyer. And here's some of the buildings that he ultimately constructed after the chemistry building. The U.S. Department of Commerce building, which is now the Herbert Hoover building. This was the building under construction. This is the steelwork. This was not only the largest building ever constructed in Washington, D.C. at the time. It was the largest office building ever constructed in U.S. history. And this is the way it looked at completed when it was completed. He also designed the Federal Triangle. Another famous building was the Federal Reserve Bank of New York City, the rendering on the left and the actual building on the right. And a lot of gold bullion are located in the rear of the basement of the building. So here's the chemistry building, completed in 1914. One lone tree was its landscaping. 10 years later, ivy triumphed, still no landscaping. Finally, landscaping today, and it's now Millidoler Hall. That was the panorama, really a century ago, from tennis courts to chemistry to engineering to Delta Phi. Same location today, with Voorhees Mall replacing Bleecker Place. Looks quite good. Ford Hall Dormitory, this is the second dormitory following dormitory originally on Old Queens campus. That was one of the subdivided lots on College Avenue. Completed Ford Hall. Again, this was a supplement to previous residential facilities. And so this was one of the finest residential college structures, adding to the rooms that were available in Winans Hall. Mature landscaping and some ivy. Ford Hall today, it's now sitting vacant. It also had a famous architect, Bertrand Goodhue. What did he do? Well, he did the Nebraska State Capitol, in Egyptian revival style. He constructed the Los Angeles Central Library, and he also did St. Bart's, a very revered structure on Park Avenue in New York City on the National Register of Historic Buildings. The ceramics building was next, and one of the final buildings built before World War II. Why a ceramics building? Well, the ceramics industry, ceramics, clay, and tile industry was a major portion of the state's economy in the late 19th and early 20th century. So in 1901, the state legislature provided money for a department of ceramics. And in 1931, the state legislature provided funds for a ceramics building. This ceramics industry provided a lot of the unique materials inside. There's a lot of decorative tiles, and also it had one of the finest patios ever built in front of a Rutgers building. 1922 dedication. In that dedication, Rutgers College awarded an honorary degree to Thomas Edison, and the arrow is pointing at Thomas Edison sitting on the patio. Patio's still there, but it's now surrounded by asphalt. Willie the Silent, a long story on how Willie came to Rutgers, which we don't have time for today. That's what it looked like in 46 with Herzog Hall in the background. Another postcard colorized with Herzog Hall behind Willie. That's what it looks like today, the new academic building behind him. Finally, Scott Hall, again, a 1960s building. Rutgers once had an entomology building, a greenhouse. and this was part of the biology complex. That's what it looked like. Eventually, Scott Hall replaced it. Entomology and greenhouse were demolished. These were the houses on George Street, modest Victorian structures that Rutgers owned. That's what it was replaced with. This is 1964 completion. Looking south, Voorhees Mall is on the right, on the left rather, on the right is College Avenue. Under construction, doesn't look too bad today. And finally, the Zimmerly Art Museum. That's a rendering of the museum. And notice, even in 1983, there was still ivy on Voorhees Hall. That has long since gone, and Voorhees Hall was painted to be consistent with the new Zimmerly structure. Now, Rutgers needed athletic facilities for its students, and the seminary blocked the path north. And here's where it ultimately settled down. The red arrow is College Field. It was privately owned when the first football game took place there. The blue arrow indicates Nielsen Field. The green arrow indicates Bishop House, which was the center of the Bishop estate. So here's what had to happen. Again, here's Old Queens. This is today's Voorhees campus. The seminary blocked northward expansion. And then this is the 10-acre Bishop estate and the Bishop House. This was the well-landscaped front and the agricultural outbuildings in the rear. The black arrow points to the southern edge of Nielsen Field, the grandstand there. Another perspective looking south from the aerial photograph. Again, Old Queens here, seminary. This was the Bishop estate, Nielsen Field, and College Field. Same view in 2022, looking north, quite intensity of development. Looking west from above the Raritan River, College Field in red, it was a double block area. It was privately owned. They never completed Ray Street across it. The owners were thinking of subdividing the property for residential houses. So James Nielsen then donated this land here and paid for the construction of Nielsen Field to create a football stadium. And you can see the baseball infield right there. The first use of dynamite in New Brunswick was used to level the field for the football activities. There's a 1932 football game at Nielsen Field. This is the College Avenue gym. The northern portion of it. This was the row of houses along College Avenue. George Street is here. This is the field house portion of Nielsen Field. Paul Robeson was an All-American at Nielsen Field, a three-time All-American. He was also a catcher on the baseball team, so not only was he a scholar, he was a great athlete. This was Nielsen Field's baseball diamond, the field house. College Avenue is here. I'm sure those houses did not like the bleachers in their backyard. Close up of the field house in 1891, visitor side, Rutgers side. College Field, after Nielsen Field was built, College Field was ultimately acquired by Rutgers. And that, again, when it was still privately owned, was the first U.S. collegiate football game. This is a pre-World War II campus map. Nielsen Field is indicated there in College Field, but it became the site of the College Avenue Gymnasium after Ballantyne Gymnasium was destroyed. This is a 1930 rendering of it. This was a significant construction feat. It was reported by the New York Times. That's President Demarest. He was emeritus president at that time doing the groundbreaking, and the headline here was "Breaking Ground for Rutgers' Future Haven of Sport." So a big deal. 1947, 16 years later, with maturing landscaping, a 2022 picture, looking northwest, perspective on the 40s College Avenue gym, 2022 with the 1961 annex. Post-World War II campus map, Nielsen Field has disappeared completely from everybody's mind. So there's College Field and the College Avenue Gymnasium. In its place, it's labeled Building 44, which is University Commons. This is 45, Library Annex. Building 44 was actually two massive prefabricated factories that were destined to go to Russia under the Lend-Lease Act during World War II. The war ended, so Rutgers was able to obtain those as surplus war property. So here's those two massive buildings which dominated that area for many, many decades. This is Records Hall, which was recently demolished, but originally was a cafeteria commons. And this was a combination of field house and heating plant. So in the 1960s, it was an indoor, dirt-floored activity center where box lacrosse or indoor lacrosse was made, and the heating plant was here. And this was the library annex. These had Queen Anne fronts. It was like putting lipstick on a pig. Three sides were made out of this black corrugated metal. So this was a nice attempt to have it blend in with the Neo-Georgian campus structures. But for the most part, they were not very pretty. Finally, Records Hall came down in 2022. And as you can see, this flat area was once dynamited in order to create the flat area of Nielsen Field. The grass finally returns after 8 decades. Still along George Street opposite the river dorms, there's some forgotten remains. These were the entry gate pillars and memorial plaque. After Records Hall was knocked down, they did a modest revitalization of those gate pillars and painted the fence. Other temporary structures, again, this was all the flat Nielsen Field, were temporary metal classrooms. They were heated with little miniature oil burners, oil plants, oil heaters inside. The arrow points to a building where I had freshman composition in there. It was not one of my memorial moments as an undergraduate. These 7 elegant structures on College Avenue were eventually all acquired by Rutgers, and that became the site of Brower Commons and Stonier Hall. Only one of the 7 houses remains. It's used for ROTC today. Here's where Records Hall was demolished. Under construction, completed. Concrete was deteriorating, so it was painted white. Then across the street, the next building constructed in 1969, 1970 was the College Avenue Student Center. The original landscaping along College Avenue. Ultimately, Panera Bread replaced the landscaping. Long forgotten was the center's sunken courtyard, and this was the student lounge inside, so it had a great view of the courtyard, and over here was College Avenue. So it was well designed. However, it was too nice to continue, so a sunken food court was put in its place. Certainly the student lounge now has its drapes permanently closed. So it went from the left to the right and the entryway to the food court today. Today it's being used as the primary eating facility on College Avenue since Brower Commons was closed, and its ultimate fate is ultimately going to be resolved soon. Stage 6, Bishop Campus. This is the ortho photo of Bishop Campus today. This was Nielsen Field over here. This was the Bishop Estate, and the Bishop House is at the center, so it's totally engulfed by residential structures. This was the 10-acre Bishop estate. The Bishop House was rumored to be the finest house ever constructed in the history of New Jersey, the most technologically advanced house, certainly in New Brunswick. That's with mature landscaping and fountain. The historic grounds between the mansion and College Avenue, that's how it looked at one time, was finally acquired by Rutgers in 1925. And this was used for many, many different functions. Same location today. First construction on the Bishop campus was Bishop Quad, and this is misspelled. Wessel's Hall, Loop Hall, Pell Hall, and over here, Hegeman Hall. This was really Wessel's Hall. Mary Ann Pell was the donor, so it's the second building named after a woman on the Rutgers campus, and she honored this building with the name of his father. And one of the great names in Rutgers history, his name was Wessel Wessels. So Wessel Wessels is permanently honored with a name, with a building in his name. At the same time, there was questions about Rutgers and development of the College Avenue campus. Well, you have the Men's College on College Avenue, you have the Agricultural College on the eastern edge of New Brunswick, and then you have the Women's College along the Raritan River on the other side of downtown. And Harlan Bartholomew was hired by Rutgers. Harlan Bartholomew was in the Rutgers Hall of Distinguished Alumni. He actually didn't graduate from the School of Engineering in 1809. He had to drop out. He didn't have enough money for tuition, so he became a city planner and ultimately became what the New York Times called America's city planner and created the first planning consulting firm in the country. And Rutgers hired him, and he said, well, Rutgers is fragmented. You got to unify it and and here's a golden opportunity. So this is one of his plans for relocating the College Avenue campus to join with the College of Agriculture and Douglas College, then the Women's College here. This was the Route 1 superhighway, which was going to run through here. At the time, they never realized it would become what it is today. But this would have been the new golf course. This is the location of Rutgers Gardens today. Down here is where the Hilton Hotel is. Here's where the Douglas Chapel, Voorhees Chapel, is today. But it was too bold a plan for the trustees. So he developed a College Avenue plan, and this was his plan for the Bishop campus and the like. This is the Bishop Quad located here. The first structure actually built was Hegeman Hall, and in 1958 its basement housed the first Rutgers major computer. But this is the original development of the Bishop campus, wiping out that part of the estate grounds. That's the interior of the quad, initially looking north. This is the Wessels building, and that's the Pell building. Quad's looking north today, went through various stages of asphalt and the like, but it's sort of a marvelous restoration today. Demarest Hall, named after President Demarest, ultimately replaced the East Estate or the North Estate grounds. Rendering completed, same view today. The front of Bishop campus was then in the 1960s. These were low-rise Bishop dorms, which wiped out the West Estate grounds. These are my least favorite modern buildings at Rutgers. That's my personal opinion. And they replaced this magnificent estate. Here's a picture of the dorms completed. As you can see, all of the estate is gone except for these few trees here in Bishop House. These are the Bishop dorms under construction, pointing to Brett Hall. And we have a picture of Brett Hall under construction. This is the interior, and it's nearing completion, showing how it's going to be landscaped. This was a decorative pool that was donated by one of the classes, and I forget which class it was. That's Brett Hall, initially landscaped. You can see along here, these were spouts that would shoot out water in arches and the like. Unfortunately, it never worked. They could never balance. So some of these would overshoot and hit here. These would just dribble in. One of my classmates, who my geology instructor called a freaking nutcase, actually dumped in uh, a box of detergent one day. And this was 10 feet high with suds. Obviously, buildings and grounds were not very happy with that. Uh, Ultimately, has long since been removed, and the landscaping has essentially grown in. Uh, this is the first new gateway in 150 years, the class of 1940 gateway erected in 1964. Now, it itself is aging today, but it's holding up very, very well and a very attractive feature. Bishop Campus today, as the landscape is eventually refilling itself. Stage 7, River Road, University Heights. We ran out of land on College Avenue, so we wanted to extend the College Avenue across the river. Now, initially, this was not the Bishop enterprise it is today. I mean, it is a major concentration of buildings. But the post-war idea was this was the River Road campus. We have the football athletic facilities here. Let's relocate all the obsolete science buildings to the River Road campus. Linking them together was what's today's the Waxman Institute, or originally was the biology building. And it was perfectly centered on the center line, the extension of the center line of College Avenue. So if you're brave enough to stand in front of the College Avenue gym on the center line looking north, you will see perfectly the cupola on the Waxman Institute. That's what it looked like, essentially just after World War II ended. This was before World War II, the excavation in 1937 and 1938. This is the photo from River Road. Stadium under construction in the winter of 1937. Stadium completed, certainly in 1938. And the end zone on the north side was ringed with white pine trees. So it was quite an elegant landscaping solution. This is what Shai Stadium, its replacement, looks like today. So then and now. And underneath these grandstands, future archaeologists, if they're digging down, will find remains, concrete remains of these early grandstands. So this is the original Science Center plan developed by who? Lewis Ayers again of York and Sawyer. So their plan was centering originally biology, which became Waxman on College Avenue center line. I call this the Crescent Plan. This was a ridge line. They would line it with Georgian colonial buildings overlooking the golf course. So it was a very traditional design solution. This is a momentous occasion. President Demarest, who keeps hanging around, President Clothier, who was actually pointing to this plan here, unprecedented at Rutgers, actually following a plan that was in pre-existence. So that Wright Chemistry was actually built. He was pointing to that. That was the first building. The second building was Waxman Hall. So these are the two neo-Georgian buildings. Chemistry went from Voorhees Mall to the new chemistry building, Wright Chemistry, on today's Bush campus. The initial expansive design of biology, it says biology building. These wings were eventually taken off as too expensive. So that was York and Sawyer's or Lewis Ayers' final design, the centerpiece of it, one of the great buildings, certainly at Rutgers, even though it wasn't at its original scale. And notice the difference in almost more than 14 decades. Four Doric pilasters, the traditional Georgian colonial Federalist design, exactly matched on Waxman. So this was really the first of its kind, and then the last of its kind. These are the never built buildings, or at least a sample. This was to be engineering. This was to be physics. Eventually built engineering. This was done on the model of a suburban office park. So Murray Hall today, engineering moved in 1964 to this location, sparkling white, pristine. This also was eventually built. This was the physics building. Notice here a stone wall, which was never built to blend it into some other architectural features. So physics went from Van Dyke Hall to the River Road campus. And so this is the recreation in 1964 of the recreate of Voorhees campus, engineering building, physics building, chemistry building, biology building. Here's the golf course, certainly under construction at that point in time. So for the College Avenue campus, this was a shifting footprint of the sciences in the 1960s. So it's a relocation of all these activities from here to here. Somehow a little bit of the charm was lost in that transformation. Once that happened, post-war, it was realized in the late 1950s that the Voorhees Library was inadequate for an expanding university library needs. So the university planned a new centralized library. And this is what resulted today, the original Alexander Library, the Alexander Library Edition. 39 campus map. This shows the property where the library was built. The original half was owned by Rutgers. It was the prep dormitory campus. Those were the original dormitories overlooking the Raritan River. Beautiful structures. This was the College Avenue gym. Close up. Make way for the library. This is the rear of the library, and it replaced this. This was the campus view from their dormitories of the Raritan River. This is the Rutgers Prep today. It moved out Easton Avenue. Exact same situation along the Raritan Canal, Delaware Raritan Canal and the Raritan River. The rendering of Alexander Library, one little anecdote. This was a sculpting, marble sculpting that was to be built. Doc Wilkins told me the story. It was commissioned by the Board of Trustees. They didn't like it. They were not going to erect it. The sculptor sued. Sculptor won. Rutgers had to pay the sculptor, but they could never put a different sculpting on that wall, so it had to remain blank. So Rutgers covered it with pyracantha. This is a close-up of the colonnade and the stacks. The stacks were originally to be covered with glass, highly modern and modernistic. So it was built with cantilever construction, so you could hang a glass wall and not have any columns interfere with it. This was the original front perspective. New Jersey Room was built as the a special place to hold lectures. That's when it was completed. It was named the New Jersey Room in honor of New Jersey, provided the funding. It was a triple height space, and it overlooked the New Jersey Garden. The New Jersey Garden was again honoring the state of New Jersey. A 55-foot long brick patio resembling New Jersey. This is what it looked like from inside the New Jersey Room. A water feature, very ahead of its times. The Garden Club planted native plants native to each region of New Jersey around it. That's what it looked like when the landscape was mature. Today it was obliterated, and this is the exact location, and that was its replacement in the new addition to the library. Rendering of the addition to the library wiped out the front lawn, needed functions desperately, but it did diminish the original library, overscaled. So then and now, another perspective then and now. River Dorms, College Park, orthophoto today. This was originally College Park, as I think I pointed out earlier. It became the site of the River Dorms. Depression era panorama, Nielsen Field, George Street, River Dorms today. It was College Park. Originally housed the temporary classrooms. Rendering of the River Dorms. They were originally to be integrated into the Raritan River and canal under construction, completed. Unfortunately, Route 18 was extended. The piers, which would support a deck, construction advances, eventually covered. That's what it looks like today. 22 photo of the River Dorms. Dick Edwards, my colleague, took this photo. We almost lost him. He slipped down the embankment into the river, but we rescued him. Under construction, construction advances. This was my room in 1961, 62, when it was a relatively young building. Originally, marble cladded the columns here. Eventually, it warped and was stripped off. Rutgers did not do a good job of integrating it into the Raritan River asphalt and parking one. That was the view of the canal and the river from my room. This was the activity center, originally known as the Ledge, River Dorms, and the Ledge. Ultimately, I got a room here in 574 George Street. I had a single room in the turret, had my view of the Raritan River restored. Final stage 10, the end of the journey. This was a massive redevelopment involving DevCo, public-private partnerships, state of New Jersey, Rutgers, and the like. These are the buildings that comprised it. This is the ortho photo of stage 10. These are the Sojourner Truth apartments. Another story of a corner. This was originally the Robert Wood Johnson Mansion, one of the great structures in the city of New Brunswick. Notice this wonderful historic street lamp. Close up, the arrow points to the top of the cupola. Rutgers had the building, the cupola disappeared, fell into disrepair, demolition begins, demolition continues. It became the Scott Hall parking lot. The arrow points to the famous grease trucks, which were located on the northern edge of the parking area. So another miraculous transformation from mansion to parking lot to Sojourner Truth. Sojourner Truth was a slave in one of the president's families and the like. She became a famous abolitionist. So stage 10, two remarkable transformations, Seminary Hill and the the Robert Wood Johnson Mansion site. So today's big picture, this is the College Avenue campus, relatively diminutive compared to the scale of the Rutgers Empire in New Brunswick as it exists today. So these are all the buildings that existed around 1910, 1912. Blue arrow points to the College Avenue campus. The black arrow points to the Queens campus block and the 6 buildings that are located there. So that was the acorn that created this vast, vast empire. So that is the end of the basic journey. And that's what our book covers completely. And I do want to point out that this is not from the shameless plug department. We do want to increase sales of the book because all of the royalties of the book are being donated to student financial aid at the School of Engineering, the Blaustein School, and the School of Social Work. So thank you very much for your time and attention. Questions?
Thank you so much. So we do have a few questions we'll try to get to. Someone asked, is there a reason why we can't bring the ivy back to some of the buildings?
Yeah, that is a great question. Originally, the thought was ivy would destroy the walls of the building, but there's, like many scientific enterprises, there's counter analyses and research. So one of the suggestions, at least on masonry buildings, is that ivy can have a positive effect. It blocks the sunlight and keeps the building cooler in winter. It also helps insulate the buildings during the winter and the like. So, yeah, I think it is a possibility. I think it's should be on the agenda of this of SEBS, the School of Environmental and Biological Sciences, to do some work. Princeton has done that on several of its buildings, restored the ivy.
All right, next question. Someone wanted to know if you could speak on Ford Hall.
Yes, Ford Hall was designed as a unique residential hall because it's three different sections inside the building with three separate entrances on College Avenue. And essentially it became obsolete given today's fire standards as it existed, as a residential hall. So there have been discussions over the years on how to modify that building because of its initial design, and some of the floors are not level in each of the three sections. And so it turns out that it's been very, very, some of the proposals have been very, very expensive. There are some other potential opportunities for redevelopment that I think the foundation is working on, but I think is an extraordinarily, as significant historic value to Rutgers, and somehow it should be preserved and not being knocked down for a standard interstate issue type building.
All right, very popular question. If you can speak on Brower Commons and what is coming.
Yeah, I don't know exactly uh, uh, what Brower Commons is doing. Frank Wong, the campus planner, vice president of institutional planning and operations, is a graduate of the Blaustein School, so I know him very, very well, and I haven't been able to talk to him. He enabled us several months ago to get a tour of the building because I was always wondering, does it have any value to being preserved? And we went through it. And the HVAC systems, the heating systems, all of the apparatus at the bottom of the building, in the basement of the building, are not in very good shape. And again, it was a 1960s building constructed very cheaply. So I'm not sure the features, of the future of the building. After seeing the details of the interior of the building and the quality or lack of quality of the initial construction. Again, 1960s was not a good time for building construction. I'm more sympathetic for it to be replaced by something else. There is the RAMSA plan that's on a number of websites, which indicate that location would be the start of a mall centered on the College Avenue gym and heading toward the Raritan River. So its future, I think, as a building is very, very questionable, but the exact design, what the costs can be, what the potential of other buildings are unknown at this time in this budget situation.
All right, let's see some more questions. I can't even keep up with how many are coming in. Okay, for those, I'll just say for everyone, we are recording this, so we'll have it online later for people who want to go through and click through it again or listen to it again. So they will be online. We will share a link. Okay, next question. A few people mentioned about there was a College Avenue design competition and talks of a monorail. Anything you can say on that?
Yeah, I was on the uh, judiciary, of that enterprise that Dick McCormick had set up, and he had famous architectural firms redesign the College Avenue campus. And several of those proposals did have sort of a monorail system running along Route 18 with stations, they only focused on College Avenue, but the station's roughly where uh, the Student Activity Center, formerly the Ledge, were located. And also a feature of those plans was a walkway across the river at that point. And following the competition, RAMSA was the principal designer of I think it's called the 1929 plan, which incorporated a number of the features, of the competitors in the College Avenue competition. That did not include a monorail. Uh, However, that would be, my own opinion is, uh, if we had a different administration in Washington where we could secure federal funds, which does not seem possible for the next 4 years. Maybe we should consider something like that. But the monorail technology has never really been uh, utilized effectively as we would think. And again, given the number of distant destinations within the complex campus structure that we have, probably a more attainable future would be dedicated busways and more electric buses.
Okay, another question. Someone said that they are interested in the families whose names are in all of this, the Voorhees, Winans, Ruckers, etc. Is that information covered in the book at all?
Yes, not extensively, but we do touch upon, I think, each of the names that have been involved in there. So yeah, you can get a good head start on if you want uh, uh, more depth than we provide. I think this provides the foundation for you to do that. But I think every single building, we did indicate who the building was named after, and in many cases why. But our task here was unique in terms of describing how the campus of today came into being, and really a focus on the physical structures and the physical development, because there have been a number of other social histories of Rutgers that we were really not competent really to cover in our work.
Another question asks if the book addresses Douglas campus at all.
No, we initially were thinking of doing an entire New Brunswick campus book. And this goes way back to 2017, and we realized it was far too big a task that for us it would have been a 10, 12-year project rather than a 6-year project, and maybe even longer. And why we focused on College Avenue was really because, I've been on the College Avenue campus or associated with it from 1961 onward. And I like to say, yeah, I've been here since 1961. So I guess you can say I'm getting on in years. I now stand as living proof that you are only young once, but you can be immature forever. And that characterizes me. So I had intimate knowledge and did experience many of the changes there. And then David Listigan came by in the 70s, and then Dick Edwards was chancellor and overseeing part of Stage 10 and its redevelopment. So that's really where we had, I think, our core competence and the like. I think the Douglas history and the women's college history is fascinating. But I think a group of people from Douglas should really be the authors of a study focusing on the physical development of the campus. There have been, again, a history of the social and structural evolution of the campus, but the buildings themselves, and we've seen some pictures of the original campus design and the like, and they were quite extraordinary. So there's a great tale to be told there. And the same thing for SEBS and the Cook College campus. I think somebody who has lived on that campus for many years should be the focal point or the initiator of such a study. Bush and Livingston, again, we only covered part of Bush that related to its early linkages to the College Avenue campus. But I think Livingston College, Camp Kilmer, and the Bush campus, as has evolved over time, is another extraordinary story that has to be told.
All right, we're going to do two more, even though they just keep coming. A few people asked about the original 1766 campus. Are there any, does it cover that? Is there any place, a book that they could look to see images of that?
Uh, in the book, we have 10 chapters that focus, or 11 chapters, but 10 chapters focus on the 10 stages of development. And then we have seven appendices, which we pompously call campus contexts. Uh, and one of them is certainly the pre-inhabitants of New Brunswick in the College Avenue campus, the original Native American peoples. And then the Rutgers early journey before they acquired the old Queens property in 1807. So this involves the old Frelinghuysen mansion in Somerville, which President Demarest has said deserves one of the early initiators of Rutgers College before even the original charter in 1766, because it's where Reverend Frelinghuysen educated various Dutch Reformed students for the Dutch Reformed ministry. So it's really one of the early starts of the New Brunswick Theological Seminary and Rutgers College and the like. But we have that, and it was quite a journey out to various parts that were pushed out of the tavern in New Brunswick, out to Millstone, out to Ranchburg Township, and then they settled into College Hall, right, which is a monument in front of the Heldrick Hotel where that was located. But we do have a full history and devote a lot of time in the book to the Queens campus, which again was the first 6 and 7 buildings built at Rutgers. So we have really a full history of those, yeah, as we do for most of the buildings.
Okay, this one we'll end with because I think it's unique. Someone said, if you could bring back one building or feature that has since been demolished, what would it be?
I would bring back the New Jersey Garden, which was the centerpiece of the front of what is today's Alexander Library. And New Jersey Hall was eliminated. Again, that was the prestige space for guest lectures, for really distinguished speakers, or for distinguished meetings and the like, overlooking that New Jersey Garden, because it was really iconic. And yeah, my fear is like the sunken garden of the student center was eliminated. Unfortunately, those become easy places for building expansion and you lose them. But I think that was really a great feature, of the campus that is going to be very difficult to replicate. So my first choice would be to have that back.
Okay, I thank you so much, Dr. Hughes. I mean, the amount of people that joined us live, the amount of questions we are still getting, we're going to have to do a part two or something because clearly, not only is this interesting, but I'm getting messages of alums who just love learning history of Rutgers that many of us would never know or find this interesting, like these little tidbits that seem like secrets. So thank you so much for all of this. We will send a follow-up email with the link to the video for everyone asking. We will put the link to the book in the email as well if you'd like to purchase it. Anything, Dr. Hughes, before we sign off?
No, I'd be very happy to do another information session if the demand certainly is there, but it's certainly a pleasure to be able to present the book and all these great insights that I achieved, particularly from Doc Wilkins there, which if we didn't have the opportunity to do this book, it probably would have been lost to history.
All right. Well, thank you everyone so much. Have a great afternoon. And I can't thank you, Dr. Hughes, enough.
My pleasure.
Bye, everyone.